Hello, people on the other side of a screen. It's your favorite garage dwelling Sarah here with another mechanical review. Today I have the 2022 Toyota GR86. Several months back I reviewed this car when it first debuted on a racetrack in New York. There is a link up above if you want to check it out. That car was a manual transmission, however. This one has the auto in it. Well, that's weird. The exhaust tip looks like those Legos that look like the Lego person head, but it's not the same Lego as the Lego person head. That's what this tip looks like. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty bigger on the top. There's a bolt in the bottom, holds it on. You just remove it and swap the tips out. What's in here? It's hollow. Interesting, it's got some fins for aerodynamics as well. Northern climate viewers, if you own one of these cars, that looks like a place for salt and slush to collect and cause rust, FYI. Oh, weird! There's some of the plastic protective shipping tape left on here that someone forgot. Oh, I want to peel it like sunburn. So bad. Wow, this is sticky. This thing must have been just, oh, there's a rock stuck to it. Must have been just recently rubber undercoated, like this is gonna go to a northern climate next, maybe. Anyway, it has a multi-link rear suspension, all of which is steel construction, hence why they probably put rubber undercoating on it. I'm leaving my fingerprints, that's fun. My finger's sticking to it, gross. This is quite possibly one of the tiniest rear anti-sway bars I've ever seen in my entire life. It's only 15 millimeters in diameter. It's adorable. Well, that's an interesting subframe bushing for the rear diff. It's got two bolts, one above each other. Also, fun fact, this lower link on the previous generation 86 was the same part off of my Forester XT. It's interchangeable between the two vehicles. Like Legos. Whoa, now I understand the Lego exhaust tip. This is a conspiracy theory right there. This rear diff right here, standard Torsen LSD on the GR86. The automatic transmission has a 3.9 final drive ratio, whereas the manual transmission, it's a 4.1. This right here, the premium package with automatic transmission, is the heaviest possible configuration for the new second generation Toyota 86, weighing in at 2,868 pounds. That right there is the most heavy duty underbelly plastic I've ever seen on a new car before, and it's texturized too. It's weird though, because it doesn't have it over here. This is a thinner, smooth plastic, and then up front, it's that felty cardboard nonsense. But above that, you have a nice aluminum pan under the engine. That is the strangest looking mid-pipe resonator I've ever seen in my entire life. It's definitely muffling some sound. Listen to that thing. It looks like the thing from Joe Dirt that he hits with the hammer and the shit comes out of the top of it. In case you were wondering, the diameter of the factory exhaust on this car, for modification purposes, outside diameter, 60 millimeter post first resonator. And then right after the cat, you have 63 millimeter diameter piping. I don't know if that helps anybody, but there you go. The GR86 utilizes a McPherson strut style front suspension, most of which is constructed out of steel with the exception of the inner tie rod and the anti-sway bar end link. The anti-sway bar itself measures in at approximately 18 millimeters. As I already mentioned, there is two transmissions available with the GR86 and the Subaru BRZ alike. The 6-speed manual is a fucking gem in this car, absolute blast to drive. And this is the TX6 Alpha 6-speed automatic transmission. It does have some flappy paddles on the back of the steering wheel, and we'll see what those do here in a little bit. It's time for the braking test. Nobody behind me. Ready? Woo! Great. Exceptional. That made my eyes hurt. Some grippy tires. Braking up front was accomplished with a set of 11.6-inch front rotors, or 294 millimeters. It has a two-piece floating front caliper, and around them you got a set of 18 by 7.5 satin black wheels wrapped in a 215/40 Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tire. If you don't get the premium pack, you get some 17-inch wheels and some non-grippy tires that allow you to do sideways slidey boy things. It's kind of fun. Also, these vents you see on the front fenders are functional aero. There's inlets right here. See my fingers? Uh-oh, they're stuck. As well as the ones in the front bumper cover in front of that wheel well. Out back, you got an 11.4-inch or 290 millimeter rotor with a single pot caliper and square stance wheel and tire. This is the same 215/40 back here as you get in the front. In the name of science, I shall now give this thing the beans. In the center console, I have a few buttons here that I can use to defeat traction control entirely or put it into track mode, which is limited amount of traction control. And then I have sport, which I will engage, and also snow in case that happens. Track mode makes sense for acceleration test. Ready? Go. Ooh. Yeah, it screams at that for RPM. Sounds great. That's good. It's not bad. It's a little slower than the manual transmission because I can't launch it as hard. I bet you track bread would be tasty. Nice and light. Look at that. It looks like the color under hood of my MR2. Similar color red. Interesting. Under the hood of the Toyota 86 is the jointly developed between Subaru and Toyota FA24 Delta. It is an all aluminum dual overhead cam 16 valve flat 4 that produces 228 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 184 pound-feet of torque at 3,700 RPM. That torque is important because that is the biggest difference in this engine versus the FA20 in the first generation of the 86. The Boxer engine just kind of makes this a visually appealing engine bay. I like the layout of it. I miss the red wrinkle finished aluminum intake manifold that the FA20 got in the mid-cycle refresh. And I wonder if this is removable. It is! It's the smallest engine cover ever. Look, it comes off. I love that it says both Toyota and Subaru on here. It's a collaboration between the two companies. Some people say, oh, it's just a Subaru. Oh, it's just a Toyota. No, it's a collaboration. D4S because both port and direct fuel injection. All right, engine cover, you can go back on. So cute. It's a fairly easily accessible engine bay to get to everything inside here. The frame rail's a little close to the cylinder heads down there, but it's not terrible. With the first generation of these cars, I feel the number 86 was more significant because it was a squared engine at both 86 millimeter bore and stroke. These FA24s are oversquared at a 94 millimeter bore and an 86 millimeter stroke with 12.5:1 compression ratio. I much more rather have a bunch of torque down low though, and that torque dip that was synonymous with the FA20, that's essentially gone. I guess you can kind of see it a little bit on the dyno graph, which is actually on the gauge cluster, but you really don't feel it anymore. I don't notice it, especially even with the automatic transmission. What in the Rue Goldberg machine is going on with this AC pipe? I never noticed that the first time I drove one of these things. Look at that, that's just the weirdest routing, how it just goes around and does all kinds of bendy stuff. That's cute. The alternator and the AC compressor have little plastic shields over the pulleys. Let's see what manual mode is like. We can feel that Torsen LSD coming out of the corner right there. I mean, it lets you rev all the way to red line and it will bounce off rev limiter if you don't shift. Since I already reviewed this on a racetrack, I'm not really gonna give you much on driving impressions for handling ability because I'm on public roads. But the biggest thing I noticed a difference between the automatic transmission version of this and the manual transmission is this one just feels a little restricted. It is a little blip on the downshifts. That's nice. I think you can extract a little bit more of the RPMs in manual mode versus auto. It lets you bring it just to the cusp of redline, whereas it's probably not optimal for where the power and torque are at in the power band, but it does let you do that. And one thing I think a benefit of the automatic is it'll give you the ability to focus more on your line on a track than if you have a manual transmission, depending on your skill level as a driver. But I could see a benefit in that. It's a little bit more consistent. Yeah, there is a bit of hesitation and delay in the throttle response over the manual. It's a little bit of like sponge, like nothing is home, and then it like reacts. And this is in the sport mode too. I do think it detracts from the nature of this car. It's kind of like having a really expensive designer swimming pool and filling it full of sand. Now, in the case of a vehicle that's equipped with a dual clutch like the Volkswagen GTI, that in that instance is better than the manual transmission, I will argue. A GTI or Golf R, hands down better with the dual clutch gearbox over a traditional 3-pedal manual. But in this instance, the automatic, I feel, is not better than the manual. Looks-wise, I feel this second generation is going to age better than the first generation just because it's a little more bland in a classy way, if that makes sense. Change in asphalt. See how it got quieter? Yeah. Road noise, that's another thing too. There's quite a bit of road noise in here, but those are the things you don't really care about when you're buying a car like this. Otherwise, you just buy a commuter bubble and blend in like everyone else. I'm glad it's still got one of these. I like the interior in here, especially on the premium package. I love the Alcantara on the top of the doors right here. It just, at times when I'm driving it, I find myself wanting to pet the door. And the same thing on top of the gauge cluster, that needs a good pet too. For this being naturally aspirated and as quick as it is, I think the fuel economy on this thing is great. Absolutely great, especially the highway fuel economy. And if you're a person that likes to have fun in life, you could totally daily this car. If you're just a boring sheeple, then you probably wouldn't like this car. Even if you have kids. My mom drove a Pontiac Firebird when she had me. Yep. So you can drive fun cars if you have a kid. It's possible. You just gotta want to have fun. If you guys have never seen one of my car reviews before, I have multiple categories to rate and assess them, starting at the bean score. This is an assessment of 1 to 5 beans based on the feeling you get behind your belly button when you give it the beans. And the GR86 with an automatic transmission is getting a rating of, it felt just a smidge slower than when I drove the 6-speed manual, but I did drive that on the East Coast, which is at a lower altitude, definitely has a better DA than what we have here in Tucson. So could be that factor, but it's still pretty quick in the upper RPMs, that's for sure. Next is the cookie score, is assessment on a 1 to 5 cookie scale based on what you get for what you spend. And this car right here is getting a rating of 4.3 cookies. This is excellent value right here. It doesn't get much better than that, but I am giving it room to grow in the rating because this car just recently came out. So they're gonna make some changes and improvements as time goes on. So there has to be room for the score to go up as well, I think. Next is the mechanic score. It's an assessment on a 1 to 5 wrench scale based on how much of an ass pain a vehicle would be to work on. And this GR86 GT with an automatic transmission is getting a rating of 3.9 wrenches. It's a simple recipe. It's rear wheel drive. There's not a lot to it. It's got a boxer engine, but if you look at the last generation of the GT86 and the BRZ, tons of young people buy these as their first tuner car and experience getting to do turbo kits and superchargers and coilovers and all kinds of stuff to them. So I think this is the same recipe. Simple to work on and definitely a good project car. Lastly is the Penguin score. This is an assessment on a 1 to 5 scale based on how much I personally like a vehicle. And the GR86 GT with an automatic is getting a rating of 4.5 Penguins. This car is not ruined with an automatic transmission, but under no circumstances would I ever recommend someone getting one of these with an automatic. If you can't drive a manual or you don't like manual transmissions, I would recommend a different vehicle altogether. This is a true enthusiast and a driver's car, so I think it should only be offered with a manual transmission, just like the Civic Si. It's just the way this car, I feel, should only be equipped. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys soon with another. Bye!